super fun, and all about artisan cheese and more to melt your peaceful heart and toast your peaceful life. Coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, this is the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hey, this is Scott Hall from Peaceful Heart Farm, and you are listening to the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hello, everybody. Melanie Hall here. I hope you are doing well. The conversation today and every day revolves around the value of tradition, traditional living, traditional food prep and storage, traditional cooking, and of course, traditional raw milk products and artisan cheese. Topics discussed here are designed to create new perspectives and possibilities for how you might add the taste of tradition to your life. And you can make your own cheese just as well as anyone. You know, a few years ago, I offered a piece of my cheese for tasting to a coworker, and her response was, "Cheese can be made by regular people?" I'm not sure what she thought about how cheese got to the grocery store. I regret not asking her, though. I was sensitive to not making her feel uncomfortable about not knowing how cheese is produced, so I didn't ask. I've heard kids sometimes think their food simply comes in cans and boxes and just, beans grow in the grocery store. Or not grown at all. They just are in the grocery store. Meat appears in the cooler section by magic. There's no concept of plants and animals as the origination point. And lots of people today have no connection to their food. Since you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that you're not one of them. I'm thinking you're very interested in the answers to the question, from where does my food originate? I've spoken about the basics of cheese making, and today I want to talk about the basics of the equipment and the setup you need to be able to make your own cheese at home. Every part is very important and not that expensive, for the most part, and much of it involves using what you may already have in your kitchen or can easily purchase at your local department stores. Hey, I want to take a minute here to say welcome to all my new listeners. Welcome back to the veteran homestead loving regulars who stop by my Farmcast for every single episode. I appreciate you all so much. I wouldn't be here without you. And I am so excited, first of all, to share with you what's going on at the farm this week. So we'll have some homestead life updates. Then you can make your own cheese, part 1. And today's recipe is Greek meatballs and yogurt mint sauce. All right, first of all, let me talk about the creamery. The roof of the creamery is on and, quote, dried in. The floors are swept clean. It looks wonderful in there. It's a little dark in there. There's a whole bunch of doors and windows that we purchased last year, and they've been kept under a tarp. They are now inside and safe from the weather. According to Scott, that is one of the next steps, is getting all the doors and windows in place. I think he might be putting wood frames into the concrete blocks right now. He's banging on something out there. I can hear him. The cows. Well, the birthing events draw ever nearer each day. Less than 2 months remain before Claire is scheduled to give birth to a beautiful purebred Normandy calf. So far, all is going well. No issues to report there. The sheep, the goats, the donkeys, they're all doing great. They're eating hay and eating hay and eating hay. That's what they do in the winter. And same for the quail. They're eating their 24% protein chick feed ration and huddling together to stay warm. They look great. Game birds need that higher protein ratio than domestic chickens. Domestic chickens 16 to 18% protein, but game birds, 22, 24, or even higher sometime for game bird chick feed. I can't wait until the quails start laying eggs again and we can start hatching out those cute little quail chicks. But let's talk cheese. Let's talk cheese now. You can make your own cheese. I'm sure many of you want to develop new cooking skills, and making cheese might be one of them. It does take practice, and you may even need to attend a hands-on cheese making workshop, but cheese making absolutely can happen in your home kitchen. You'll need some equipment, a cheese making space, and sanitation procedures. Having a proper space with the right equipment and knowing how to keep the space and tools properly cleaned and maintained goes a long way to making it fun and successful. You will want cleanable, easily maintained equipment and surfaces that pose no risk when used to manufacture food for your family's consumption. So let's take a look at all of those issues and help you get set up to make cheese. But there is so much information. This will be 2 podcasts. This one, the current one, is going to cover all of the equipment needs. And then next, it'll be about setting up your space and the cleaning requirements and the methods. Choosing your equipment first, I'll go over how to choose things you will need and want to have on hand for cheese making. Some of them are optional, especially at first, depending on the cheese that you want to make. And due to the popularity of home cheese making these days, you can often find local cheese stores carrying many cheese making supplies. I'll put a link in the show notes for one of my favorite resources for online, and that's the New England Cheese Making Company. Their website is cheesemaking.com. All right, so the first piece of equipment, pots or vats. We call them cheese vats. The primary consideration when choosing the proper receptacle to make your cheese is material and condition. Whether you make your cheese in a 1-gallon pan on the stove or in a steam-jacketed cheese vat, your receptacle is best if it's made of high-quality stainless steel. You may or may not know this, but stainless steel comes in varying grades. The cheaper it is, the less likely it will hold up over time. You may even find that it will get rust spots. So keep that in mind when choosing your vat or your pot. So you can also, for home use, stainless steel pots with a stainless or a tempered glass lid. That's a type of glass that's fine to use in high heat situations. You can use that. Just be aware that the glass ones can break and ruin a batch of cheese. So a coated or enamel surface is also fine for home use, as long as you inspect it before and, even more importantly, after use. If you notice a chip missing from your enamel pot when you're done making cheese, you should suspect that it's in your cheese, and that cheese will need to be thrown away. In any case, the surface of the vessel must be easily cleaned. So any deep scratches or even rivets on the inside, on the surface, or in nooks, that's undesirable. In fact, in commercial world, rivets and such are not allowed. The next factor for you to consider in choosing your pot will be the size. Now, the most common at-home cheese vat is a double boiler type setup of a pot set in a sink of warm water or inside a larger pot of water on a stove top. So you have your pot of milk, and it's going to sit in water, and that'll either be in your sink or on your stove top inside of another pot. Personally, I have a 12-quart stainless steel pot and a 24-quart stainless steel pot that I use in my kitchen sink. I don't use the stove top, but it's fine if you do. When I first learned to make cheese, I learned to make it on the stove top. The smaller pot I use to make a 1 or 2 gallon cheese. In the larger pot, I use to make cheese, usually 4 to 5 gallons of milk. Now, if you choose to use your stovetop, look for not only your large stainless steel pot, but also an enamel or a stainless steel water bath canner. Most of the water bath canners are actually enamel, and they're much more lightweight, and that's just going to hold water, so that's just fine. Walmart carries these products, as well as canning supply retailers. They would have them. So for the stovetop, you need a mechanism to keep the inner pot containing the milk off of the bottom of the pot with the heated water. Actually, I do this also when I'm in the sink. I have like a cooling rack that I sit my pot on, and what that does, you use any kind of wire cooling rack, or even just a few mason jar lid rings at the bottom of your canner, and the rings will rust, but As long as you're not using that water bath pot for cooking, it's not a problem. And in general, all of my cheese making supplies are used only for cheese making. I don't want them contaminated with anything else. Next time when I'm doing the cleaning thing, you'll see kind of more how that works. And you don't have to do that. I do that just because I'm very conscious of outside contamination in my cheese. When I get to the sanitation instructions, you can sanitize it even if you use it for something else. Anyway, now one other option I will mention is using your slow cooker. I've never used mine to make cheese, but I'm pretty sure it would work. It would be maybe only a half gallon or a gallon of milk because it only holds maybe 6 quarts. So that would be the limitation there for me. I could only make a really small batch of cheese. Speaking of which, I have used my Costori Instant Pot to make queso fresco. Now that cheese is so simple, it requires nothing more than that stainless steel Instant Pot and a slotted spoon. And check out my website for that recipe. I'll put a link in the show notes for that. Really, really easy cheese to make. Now that's not a meltable cheese, but it's easy. It's great. It's a great breakfast cheese. Now, you might need milk storage containers. You can skip this section if you're making cheese with your milk purchased from the grocery. Yes, you can use store-bought milk, as long as it's not ultra-pasteurized. Regular whole milk, pasteurized milk purchased from the grocery store will make a decent cheese. Obviously, it's not the same as making it with raw milk from your own cow or from raw milk you obtained via whatever purchasing rules you have in your state. And there are a few differences in ingredients and amounts of culture, but pasteurized milk will make any cheese that your heart desires. But if you're collecting your own milk or buying it from your neighbor, there's a good chance that you will store it for at least one day. We use stainless steel cans with tight-fitting lids, but these are expensive. Our 2.5-gallon stainless steel milk cans were at least $60 each, plus shipping. The mason jars are a great option here. We use the half-gallon size. I use those for herd shares, and I also use them in my own refrigerator for storing milk. I also have a bunch of 1-gallon jars. That's less jars to empty and clean when I do make the cheese, but they're a bit harder to find. Just keep in mind that if you find a chip in the glass, it's likely in the milk, and that milk goes out. Keep the milk very cold. Use it within 1 day. If you wait any longer than that, the naturally occurring enzymes and bacteria will overpopulate and overrun the cultures that you add. You'll get cheese, but who knows what it will be. Now, that is not true of the pasteurized milk. Pasteurized milk doesn't have any live enzymes and bacteria in it. So, you can use it has a use-by date on it. But you want your milk to be as fresh as possible, even if it is pasteurized milk from the store. Now, let's talk about forms, hoops, and molds. Now, these items usually need to be purchased, and it's one of a few things that is worth the investment. In all honesty, you're probably going to spend more money on cheese forms than you need to. It's pretty much impossible to know early on what types of cheese you will end up making the most and what size of wheels that you'll be happiest with and how many forms you really need. And don't get too stressed about it. You may even be able to craft your own. The main thing to remember is that they must be made of some kind of material that is easily cleaned and not negatively affected by the acid produced by the draining cheese. So no aluminum or copper. Oh, and as an aside, the terms hoop, form, and mold are pretty much interchangeable. Hoop, form, mold. It's a place where you put the curds in. As long as they're easy to clean and made of food-grade material, you can come up with some pretty creative options. You can use plastic colanders, salad spinner bowls, or even food storage bowls with drainage holes drilled in the sides. Some people even use large diameter PVC pipe or the plumbing piping that they use for cold water lines. You can use those as cheese forms and drill holes in the side of them. You have to have a way for the whey to drain out of the curds. Now, also keep in mind the ruggedness of the form if you're going to be applying weight during draining. So if it's a pressed cheese, You'll want to consider that. The less pressure that is used, the more option you have when selecting your forms. If you're making a cheese that requires a great deal of pressure, such as cheddar, you will need a very sturdy, straight-sided form, or you can use a curved-sided Cordova form. Those are a little pricey, but they're designed to take the pressure exerted by a mechanical press. More on presses later. Now, when shopping for forms made specifically for draining cheeses, you're going to have lots of choices. You'll likely end up with some you'll only use once or twice, and maybe you can give those away to another cheesemaker who's in the early experimentation phase. Maybe you can even find some from someone else who's past the experimentation phase and is looking to get rid of what they got that they've decided not to use. They come in 4 basic types. Those meant to be used with cheesecloth and pressure. There's a basket type forms. Those are for ladled, unpressed curds. Then there's the micro-perforated forms. They have many tiny holes to simulate the effect of cheesecloth. And then there's the Cordova type forms that have a built-in mesh lining. And the Cordova and micro-perforated forms are notorious for being difficult to clean, but they also eliminate the need for cheesecloth and the cleaning involved with its use. So a little bit of a trade-off there. Let's talk about cheesecloth, draining bags, and mats. Cheesecloth serves 2 purposes during draining. First, it helps keep the loose curd in a shape while it knits back together and forms the cheese. And second, it helps wick the whey away from the cheese toward the drainage holes in the form. And it's most important to choose the right fabric to properly drain the type of cheese you're making. In general, you can apply this policy. The finer and softer that the curd is, the tighter the weave of the cloth should be. And the fabric sold in most kitchen and department stores, it's labeled as cheesecloth. It has very open gauze-like mesh, and it's not really suitable for draining cheeses. Instead, you'll want to buy real cheesecloth from a cheese-making supply company. It's pretty inexpensive to get that, and it's reusable. Draining bags are designed specifically for making soft, spreadable cheeses, so that's going to be a very tightly woven weave there. They have very fine weave, and they're sturdily manufactured, so they can be squeezed really tightly. So a great substitute is a white pillowcase, which you will, of course, clean and sanitize before using. And if you have any sewing skills and the right equipment, you can sew your own draining bags. Draining mats. Draining mats can be used directly under cheeses such as brie and camembert during draining and aging. Under forms during draining, they help keep the form itself up out of the draining whey, and under hard cheeses during aging, they'll promote airflow around the cheese. Many people use plastic needlepoint matting as a substitute. I do. It looks almost the same, and it works as well. It's low cost. It's available for purchase locally rather than having to be ordered like the official cheese matting. And I bought mine at Walmart over in the crafts section. And then you have reed mats, which I've also used. I have lots of them. I got the ones that are designed to make sushi rolls. That's also a really good choice, to use reed mats. Those are not usually, you can't use reed mats in commercial because they say they're not really that cleanable, but I find them quite useful. But anyway, for my own personal use, again, we won't be using them in our commercial operation. Now let's talk about weights and presses. Creativity is the name of the game here. Some cheese will require a specific press, but most can be improvised. The options are almost limitless when setting up a way to lightly press cheeses, from stackable cheese forms, jugs of water or sand, barbell weights. I've used them all. Now keep the following things in mind when designing your pressing system. Stability. Will the weight shift and come crashing down when you're not observing the pressing? Mine still does that from time to time. And secondly, the cleanability. Are the weights cleanable and contained so they don't leak or leach any non-food substances or chemicals into your cheese? Like my weights are they're chrome-plated barbell weights that I use mostly. That's what I mostly use. But I've used rocks and other things. Now, if you find you must move up to a mechanical press, you have two basic options, and then there's multiple choices within those options. A single wheel screw type press or a lever press. Those are your two main types. And your choice will likely revolve around the number of wheels you plan on pressing at the same time. Now, the single small wheel presses can press 2 to 3 pound wheels, and they can be expensive. And it will be quite time consuming to have more than 1 or 2 wheels that you need to remove from the press, redress them, and turn them. So let's see. When choosing a single screw type press, look for durability, cleanability, and a pressure scale. The most expensive are made from all stainless steel parts, and of course, these are the most cleanable and durable. Some single presses are made from wood and laminate parts. So I don't really use the single screw types, but again, they're certainly out there, and I've seen videos of people using them and being successful with them. Now, the lever press, also called a Dutch or Holland lever press because of its long history of manufacture and use in that country. Lever presses designed for home use are usually made of a hard wood such as maple. It's important that they not be made of a softer wood, as the lever arm from which weights will be hung can crack if it's not sturdy enough. Lever presses can be freestanding or attached to a wall. You can purchase a pre-made kit for single wheel versions, and you can find plans online. I used to have one of these mounted on my wall. Scott made it for me. Alas, I've taken it down, and I don't think I have any pictures. It was my main press when I was making 3 to 5 gallon cheeses. It would make one 3 to 5 pound wheel. It was simply a long stick of wood that it folds up and out of the way, and then you fold it down, and there's a perpendicular piece that points down to the top of your cheese, and then you hang weights off of the end of that arm, and it pushes that perpendicular press down on top of your cheese. Now, my weights were made of, there was a 1 gallon and half gallon plastic milk jugs. I put them on a scale, and I added as much water as I needed to reach a specific weight. So I had one that weighed 2 pounds, and one that weighed 4 pounds, and one that weighed 8 pounds. And then each had a small piece of rope tied to the handle, and then I could just loop that over the arm of the lever press, and I could put as many as I wanted on there. So I could put a 2 pound and an 8 pound to get a 10 pound weight on there. And there are calculations when you put that much weight on, how much weight is actually being pressed on the cheese itself, because the farther out to the tip you get, that's actually more weight that's going to be pressed onto that cheese. Anyway, I can't really describe that in a podcast. You'll need to look at the plans on that to see how that lever press works, but it certainly was effective for me. So that's it for me. I either would put direct weights on top of my molds, or I used the lever press. Those were my two favorite ways of doing it. But that screw press works as an intermediate kind of thing, especially for cheddar where you need a lot of weight onto a cheese. I just use lots and lots of barbell weights. All right, let's talk about miscellaneous tools. You'll need quite an assortment of miscellaneous tools. You'll need ladles, a curd cutting knife, measuring cups, measuring syringe, colander, a thermometer, a timer or a clock, a scale for weighing curd, and a brine tank. And if you're also waxing cheese, that's going to require equipment as well. A perforated cheese ladle can be either purchased or modified from a long-handled slotted stainless steel skimmer. You just bend the spoon part of it down so that when you're holding it over the pot, it's kind of more flat. The ladle, we use that to gently stir the curds, and the perforations allow for the whey to flow through the spoon. It also helps disperse the coagulant and the calcium chloride if you're using that when it's being added to the cheese milk. So that's a nice little slotted spoon. Just bend that up so that it's more almost a 90-degree angle. Not quite 90 degrees, but close to it. A curd knife is used to cut the coagulated milk into curds. And again, you can purchase one or use a long, narrow spatula, a frosting spreader, or even a thin piece of stainless steel. That's what I have used forever. There are some small-scale cheese harps on the market, but beware of blades that are too thick or spaced too widely. Once you make large cubes, it's a bit more difficult to cut them smaller and keep them even. They're now moving in the vat as you try to cut them. You can even fabricate a small-scale harp by use a stainless steel frame, then string it with nylon fishing line. And it's not really necessary to invest in such a harp, but it will give you the advantage of nearly perfect cubes of curd. If you're using a stainless steel round pot, you would just need a horizontal cut. Making the horizontal cuts. And then the vertical cuts, you can use the knife, as we were talking about, just using a frosting spreader, a narrow spatula to make those vertical cuts. And the vertical cuts get two ways. You cut one direction and cut the other direction, and then you've got these long, thin towers of curd, and then you have to have that horizontal cut to cut it into small cubes. So the harp helps with that, but you don't have to have it. Especially when you're making it at home in your sink, you want to get your curds as close to being the same as you possibly can. But there are ways that's where you might need to actually have a hands-on cheese making class to learn some of the finer aspects of that. All right, now for measuring liquid, you're going to need a variety of measuring cups, measuring spoons, a couple of plastic syringes, 5 milliliters, 1 milliliter sizes. So if you have a nice little set of syringes, you'll be able to make super accurate measurements of your coagulant and calcium chloride. I use these all the time. They're great. Because you're using 3 milliliters. How do you get 3 milliliters? Well, you have a 3 milliliter syringe and you just suck it up into the syringe, squirt it into the water, dilute it, and then mix it in. It's pretty easy. Now, for measuring dry powders, such as your cultures, accurately weighing and dividing it into unit doses is always the best choice, but it's often not practical for home cheese making. I use it on my large scale, but when I'm doing small scale, for measuring really tiny doses of mold and ripening cultures, I use a set of tiny measuring spoons that measure from just under a quarter teaspoon down to 1/60th of a teaspoon. So that's again a purchase, something that I purchased, and they weren't that expensive. I got them from a cheese supply house. It's a good idea to have a plastic or a stainless steel colander for holding the draining bags while you're filling them. So you put your cheesecloth in there, and then you dump your curds into it as you're forming it up. There's all kinds of uses for a stainless steel colander, so I have several of them actually. Don't use aluminum strainers. The metal will react with the acid in the whey and the cheese. You don't need a fancy thermometer for making cheese, but you do need to make certain it's accurate. You can use the simple probe thermometers that you can get them for a few dollars at the grocery store. You can also use a piece of stainless steel wire. You can fashion a nifty little hanger so the thermometer stays suspended, and you can still close the lid on your vat and watch the temperature. A clock or a timer should be available for monitoring times during your cheese makes. Your cell phone probably has a timer on it. Otherwise, again, cheap timer from the local department store or the grocery store even. If you're going to be brining cheeses, and you will be, You'll need a container large enough to float all the wheels in a batch, or you can use multiple containers. I use 2-gallon food grade buckets that I got at Lowe's, I think. I actually have some bigger ones if I'm doing a lot of cheeses, but if I'm just doing one 3 to 5 pound cheese or even smaller, that 2-gallon bucket works pretty good. Again, or you can use multiple containers too. Now your brine's going to be stored at either aging room temperature, which is going to be 50 to 55 degrees, or in your refrigerator between uses. So that'll come into consideration when I talk in the next one about space. If you'll be waxing cheeses for aging, plan on a double boiler or a dedicated crock pot that is used only for this purpose. And you'll need a natural bristle brush for waxing as well. I have several. I use crock pots. I have several small crock pots. I've gotten better at using the wax. The waxing takes a little bit of skill as well. So that's it for waxing. You just need, as I said, I like the crock pots, but you can use a double boiler. I used to have that, just a regular stainless steel double boiler that I used on my stovetop that would have water in the bottom of it, and I had the wax in the top part of it, and that's the only thing that double boiler was used for. Same thing with a crock pot. Again, you'll never get the wax off of it, so it has to be dedicated. I'm going to stop here for this podcast. In the next one, I will finish up this topic covering the creating of your cheese-making space and keeping things clean. And once you have those topics under your belt, you'll be set to make the best cheese right in your own home. Now, it's time for today's recipe. Let's see, what do we have? We have Greek meatballs with yogurt mint sauce. It's a slow simmered in a rich tomato sauce and served over rice with a tangy yogurt sauce and then crumbled feta and fresh herbs. Yum, yum. What are you going to need? You're going to need, to make the meatballs, you need ground lamb, you need fresh mint, fresh oregano, zest of lemon, you need olives, they can be green or black, you need garlic, red onion, red pepper flakes, salt and pepper, breadcrumbs, and an egg. For the tomato sauce, you're going to use a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes, 3 cloves of garlic, a tablespoon of cumin, and salt and pepper on that also. And then you got the yogurt mint sauce. It's a cup of Greek yogurt, a zest of half a lemon, juice of 1 lemon, half a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of sugar. And then for garnish, as I said, feta, crumbled, and some fresh herbs like mint and oregano. Right, so you're going to combine all of your meatball ingredients in a large mixing bowl. You're going to form the balls up. Heat a large pot on medium heat, add the oil. You're going to do like usually 2 sections of the meatballs. You want to keep space between them. You're going to brown well on one side, flip it to brown the other side, roll it to the sides and brown. And then once you have them all nicely browned, put them on a plate, repeat with the second half, and then put those on a plate. And then you're going to make the tomato sauce. Really easy. Add your crushed tomatoes, the garlic, and the cumin to a pan. Scrape that pan, combine it all well, add the meatballs, season it with salt and pepper, bring it to a simmer, turn it down to low. Cook for about an hour with the lid slightly open, and you're going to scrape the bottom occasionally to prevent burning, and the meatballs are done when that tomato sauce thickens. All right, so the mint sauce that goes over top of that, well, first of all, you want to prepare a rice of your choice, then combine the yogurt sauce ingredients. Put the yogurt sauce on top of the meatballs, crumble some feta over it, and garnish it with the fresh herbs and olive oil. Voila! And that's it for today's Peaceful Heart Farmcast. I hope you're enjoying your winter wherever you are in the world. Well, I guess if you're south of the equator, it is summer. If you're south of the equator, I hope you're enjoying your summer. The winter blues are coming on me in small amounts at the moment. I know you can't tell it while I'm recording this because I really love doing this. Anyway, I do have winter blues sometimes, but they're nowhere near the levels of past winters, and for that I am grateful. It is my diet that is contributing to that, and I'm very happy with it. And if it wasn't raining, I could go outside and watch a few animals grazing peacefully. That can cheer me up any time. Hey, if I had some milk, I could make cheese, and that can cheer you up as well. I hope this introduction to setting up your own kitchen for cheese making is helpful. It really can be done. And when I've completed the second half, there'll be a written transcript of the 2 podcasts on my website. I'll make a downloadable PDF version that you can print and study, so you can get all of that stuff together and get started with making your own cheese. Now, those Greek meatballs are fabulous. Give it a try. Let me know your variations and whatever improvements you have on it. And we have ground lamb available for purchase at the farmer's market in Wytheville, 2nd and 4th Saturdays. And at the farm here at the homestead, Tuesday mornings, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. or Saturday afternoon, 3 to 5 p.m. And that's it. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hop over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, give me a 5-star rating and a review. Love the reviews. And also, please share it with any friends or family who might be interested in this type of content. That is absolutely the best way to get the word out there. As always, I am here to help you taste the traditional touch. Thank you so much for stopping by the homestead. And until next time, may God fill your life with grace and peace.